pure act. It is in contrast to creatures only. That does not mean that the Trinity is reducible to pure act. Then what are you eating in the Eucharist?
That you can't be eating the essence. Yeah.
Well, so what are you eating? If it's body, blood, soul, and divinity, like every Roman Catholic says, what's the divinity? In the Orthodox view, it's relations of origin, which is exactly what the Cappadocians are talking about. So Aristotle is kind of basically an empiricist, but
just like those guys earlier, I was raised Church of Christ, converted to Catholicism about a year ago, and I've watched a little bit of your stuff, and I just wanted to. I'm a very big novice in terms of Thomism and stuff, but I've just been getting into theology, and I wanted to kind of discuss Actus Purus in relation to creation. I know you've talked a little bit about that.
okay.
Do you think that from a Thomistic position you can have immanent acts?
In the created order?
Immanent acts, something only actualized in the agent intellect of God.
I mean, I don't accept that any of that works with God at all. None of the church fathers talk about God having an immanent agent intellect. Can you name a church father that speaks that way? Did the Cappadocians speak that way?
Okay, so you do not accept that category.
Did you answer my question? Do any of the Cappadocians of the church fathers of the first 1,000 years speak of God as having an Aristotelian immanent agent intellect?
Not to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But
so in other words, nobody really correctly grasped Trinitarian theology until Aquinas because we needed this scheme to make it work.
Like I said, I haven't read the Cappadocians. I was just asking.
Well, how do you know Thomism is right?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so it would be for you it would be a contradiction within the Thomistic sense that wouldn't be possible under Thomism for God to actualize something within his own intellect, but not bring its effects into the created order. That would be your critique.
I don't even know what sense we're supposed to mean by God actualizing something in his intellect. I mean, if God has actualized something, it has to be the case that it's ad extra. It has to be the case that it's happening outside of the actualizer. There's no internal actualization because God is pure act with absolutely no potential.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, you would agree with that you would have that in common with Thomism.
I'm just stating their position. I don't agree with that. I'm just stating that's their position.
Oh, so you do not. Okay, yeah.
I'm saying that's two things that Thomas would believe.
But you can reconcile God not being pure act. That would be most reconcilable with the essence energies distinction, not with the Thomistic doctrine of God.
When John Damascus and St. Maximus the Confessor say that you can call God pure act, it is in contrast to creatures only. In fact, in the 200 chapters in the first 5 pages, St. Maximus explicitly says that you cannot call God in himself, in his essence, pure act. And that's precisely what Thomism does, is that it says God is reducible to and is identical to pure actuality. And we are saying that is not the case, partly because of God's free will, and partly because the Orthodox doctrine of the essence-energy distinction, which is confirmed at multiple ecumenical councils.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, like I said, when you press me on it, I don't know, I don't have explicit knowledge, infallible knowledge that Thomism is true.
Let me give you an example of something that came up a minute ago. So in the famous kenosis passage of Philippians 2, we have the statement that the second person of the Godhead, who is a divine hypostasis, willingly limited himself in the created order to not do everything he could do. How is that the case if God is identical to and reducible to pure act?
I'm not sure how that would be explainable.
It's not, because God is not pure act. And again, read the first 5 pages of the 200 chapters. Maximus specifically says the only sense in which we could call him that is in contrast to the created order. So in contrast to creatures, God is like pure act, or he's not acted upon, he's unchangeable, he's non-temporal, etc. That does not mean that the Trinity is reducible to pure act, because Aristotle's first actualizer, by definition, requires something other than himself to actualize, to exist. So when Basil critiques this position in the Hexameron, he says it's a dyad position. It ends up being an eternal other or eternal world, an eternal celestial spheres that the first actualizer is moving to be an eternal actualizer. So it just makes no sense to call God in himself a eternal actualizer, a pure act, a eternal actuality. It does apply to the divine essence in contrast to creatures. It does not apply to two ways that we name God. This is the key point that Maximus says in the first 5 pages, 200 chapters. There's two ways we name God. One is in contrast to creatures. The other way we name God is the intra-Trinitarian life. And idiot Thomists collapse these two when they say God is reducible to and identical to pure act. It's negating the two ways of naming God. Because it would make the incarnation impossible. I don't understand. I mean, I'm not being mean to you, but like, I don't understand. It's so hard-headed to get this through to people that if God is reducible to pure act, you can't have one of the hypostases entering into time and space and a mode of being that the other two hypostases don't. It undercuts the incarnation.
Oh, yeah, I understand. Like, I'm open.
Okay, fair enough. And another way to go about this is to talk about the Eucharist. If God is identical to pure act and absolutely simple in the Thomistic sense, then what are you eating in the Eucharist?
You can't be eating the essence, yeah.
Well, so what are you eating? If it's body, blood, soul, and divinity, like every Roman Catholic says, what's the divinity?
Yeah, then you'd have to be eating a created God.
Exactly. Correct.
Yeah, what you were saying, how that even gets refused, because the way I know from the little I've read, the way St. Thomas would refute that is by his eminent category within the intellect. But I can see what you're saying as well, that's something.
I just don't even, like if you look at the Cappadocian model of the triad, it's not the Thomist model at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm arguing that the Cappadocian model, if you listen to the lectures of Dr. Bo Branson on the monarchical Trinity, if you listen to the interviews that we've done with Dr. Branson, you'll notice that the Trinitarian model of the Cappadocians is what's accepted at the Second Ecumenical Council. And that's why, and I'm not trying to be mean, but again, Thomists, they don't care. They have literally no concern what theological system is accepted at Constantinople I. Because if they look, they would see that it's Cappadocian, it's not Filioque, it's the energies doctrine is essential to the Cappadocian model, and they don't want any of that, so they hand wave it and they just say, I don't care.
I see what you're saying.
Or they just quote mine and say, oh, the Cappadocians teach the Filioque and they teach Thomism, which is just ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I have heard one Thomist say, try to say that the Cappadocians were Aristotelian or scholastics because they mentioned certain Aristotelian categories.
But if that's the case, then what I meant was that they're not medieval Thomistic scholastics.
No, I completely
So
agree.
being scholastic is not the same thing as scholasticism in the Middle Ages.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and so I would just ask for someone trying to, kind of read the opposing views and form a system.
Right.
Would you recommend first and foremost the Cappadocians?
Actually, yeah, I would say watch Dr. Branson's lectures on the Monarchia of the Trinity. He's got 5 lectures on his website. If you go to the media appearances at drbobranson.com, those lectures are really good. They're essential, I would say, for Trinitarian theology. And then I would say in terms of the Cappadocians themselves, when Roman Catholics address this, they just quote mine. They literally do not read the actual works in the context. So if you go and you read Basil's on the Holy Spirit, if you read Basil's against Eunomius, you're going to see him making all the arguments you hear me make. You're going to hear energies arguments. And by energies, he uses the word operations. In the Greek, is energeia. You're going to hear him saying, we know the persons by the energies, and if the Spirit has the same energy as the Father, then he has the same nature because energy signifies nature. You're going to see nothing about filioque. You're going to see the manifestation of the Spirit through the Son, which we believe. But you're not going to find anything other than that the Father is the sole arche. You're going to find hypostatic properties. You're not going to find relations of opposition. Now, when they reply to me, say, oh, they talk about relations. No. Relations is not relations of opposition. In the Orthodox view, it's relations of origin, which is exactly what the Cappadocians are talking about. The relation that the Father and Son bear to their principle of origin, the Father. Not the principle of origin being the common essence. That's the Roman Catholic view. And relations of opposition is a medieval development in Aquinas out of Augustine's positions. And nobody in the Cappadocian world or in the ancient church father tradition is teaching relations of opposition. They do teach relations. You should read Latimer Lossky's paper on that issue. In there, he goes into the history of the Latin Church's development of the doctrine of relations of opposition. By the way, Congar, the article that I pinned on that video, I also included Congar's discussion of the development of relations of opposition, which is not relations of origin. And so here, if you read this Voloski paper, it's called The Procession of the Spirit in Orthodox Trinitarian Doctrine. I mean, within 3 or 4 pages, he's already getting into what the Roman Church means by relations of opposition versus our monarchical Trinitarian view.
Okay, I just wrote that down. Thank you very much. I would just, the last little question I have real quick is,
Sure.
I've tried to ask certain people that I would consider to know about Thomism, but I've never really got them to even address it. And I wanted you to expound on it fully because I've never heard your full explanation of it, but I do know St. Thomas would start from the peripatetic axiom, and I've heard you mention that a little bit. I'm not going to make the move when you say it's an unjustified move, that you don't agree with it in a sense. But what is your criticism
I think the
of that?
peripatetic axiom on its face is self-refuting.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing in the intellect that's not first in the senses. It's easy to refute that because the peripatetic axiom itself is not in the senses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I usually ask, and I've never really had that addressed. But you would start
because they
from
believe in self-evidence, they believe in
Yeah.
theory neutrality, they believe in all the things that I'm always critiquing. And by the way, Aristotle believed in just kind of self-evident principles and axioms. I mean, if you read Father Deacon Ananias' paper on tag and natural theology, I mean, he cites, I think, 3 places in Aristotle where Aristotle just says, look, it's just, we have to have self-evident principles or else there's nowhere else to start. That's the route Aristotle takes. He talks about that which is known in itself or that which is known by us. And we don't have access to that which is known in itself, so we have to go by that which is known by us, which is only by sense data. So Aristotle is kind of basically an empiricist, but he doesn't believe in naive empiricism. But I argue that it leads to that if you're consistent with it, because as you kind of tease it out, it leads you to Hume. There's a direct line from Aquinas to Hume, because what's the justification for the various self-evident axioms, and why do you get to say what the self-evident ones are? How do you solve the criterion problem?
Yeah, you can.
Right. Without being arbitrary. So then, in other words, it means that there's just not anything that's self-evident. Everything's theory-laden. So that becomes a paradigm debate question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your counter to that would be a paradigm where the transcendentals are justified in the mind of God.
That's what leads me to reject the natural theology evidentialist paradigm and to being forced into a transcendental preconditions debate. Because every proposition will be theory-laden, then how do we debate anything at the paradigm level? Well, we have to do a paradigm comparison. So that leads us to tag, and that's really what I was trying to convey in the whole Trent Horn debate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I will look into everything you've recommended, and maybe I'll be back to thank
Yeah, feel
you
free
or
to.
disagree
I'm
with-
sorry if I was coming off of some heated discussions earlier, so I apologize if I came out of the gates a little too hot. But you were a very cool civil guy, so I appreciate it, man. Thank you, Wayne.
Hey, no problem.
That was a great conversation. I appreciate that.